Hey everybody, in today's video, we are going to turn this head of cabbage into this little amount of powder. And if you've been around here recently, you know I'm on a kick where I'm doing this similar process, but I'm going through different foods. Today we're doing cabbage, we've done greens, we've done, what's the other one that I did? I'm not sure if this will be before or after, but there's carrots, there's beets, there's lots of other foods that we're dehydrating and powdering for lots of different reasons, but mainly nutritional, to be able to get more nutrition in our food. And also storage wise, this is such a great way to store things because it doesn't take up a lot of space, as you can see. And while I have been keeping this in my freezer, because if you've done dehydrating, you know that conditioning is something that you really should do before storing it for long-term storage. I didn't do that with this, so I've just been keeping this in my freezer, but I will show you exactly what I'm gonna do to this cabbage once it's ready to go in order to be able to keep it on my shelf and not the freezer. One thing I find very interesting with dehydrating cabbage, this happened with this exact batch. This is about one head of cabbage, about a small head, so it'll be about the same. Turned out to be about a half a cup of powder, maybe a little bit more because we've used some, but I'll show you at the end exactly how much we get out of this head and how much it weighs. Is that you can add this powder to anything that you would add a regular greens powder. I will link my greens powder video because I did a bulk processing on greens, and the whole project took about five days to complete. And you can use cabbage in a similar way. I have not yet gotten into dehydrating in a way that you can then just use the food in something reconstituted. We did do carrots. If this hasn't come out yet, there's a video coming soon about carrots, but those I left whole because I want to try to use them in a recipe itself. So for now, we've been doing powdering, and really there's a lot of different ways that you can use powders to boost flavor and nutrition, but we will be getting into that soon where it's not just going to be pulverized, that you can actually rehydrate it and utilize these things from a dehydrated state. So let's get going and I'll show you all the details on this little guy right here. For the first step of dehydrating cabbage, we need to get it in a form that allows the warm air to easily flow over it. But first, I'm going to get a quick weight on the cabbage, and it turned out to be 2 pounds and 2.7 ounces. We do lose just a little of that weight from the core, but that is close to what we will end up having in the dehydrator. A person might be able to pull the leaves off of the cabbage one by one and just lay them on the trays that way. But for my purposes, I'm going to shred it. And of course, by hand, a mandolin slicer, that'll all do this as well. My food processor makes this incredibly easy for me, and I like that it makes really uniform slices. So I'm going to use the 2mm slicing blade. I also have a 4mm one, but I like it to be the smaller ones. Even though there are some pieces to the stem that are wider, it's shocking to me how quickly and easily this cabbage dehydrates. Way quicker and way easier than I thought it would. I dehydrated the cabbage on 125 degrees and let it go for about 10 hours. The exact time it takes will depend on a few conditions, including how big your cabbage is, along with the current climate and air temperature and humidity. Look at how amazingly light this cabbage is now that it's dried. It's like there's nothing to it. When I dehydrate greens, the change that takes place during the dehydration process doesn't shock me quite the way that cabbage does. From here, it's into the high-speed blender. And just how I do all my powders, I only put in enough so it has plenty of room to bounce around for a nice, even powder. I filled my jar before remembering that I needed to condition it. So I put it back on a baking tray and put it in the oven for 1 hour at 170 degrees. You can also put it back into your food dehydrator at a lower temperature or on a tray that doesn't have holes, but I wanted to keep this sort of final part of this project completely in the kitchen. The conditioning process often results in clumping, and so I use a combination of a spoon and a fine mesh strainer to deal with that. But you could also put it back in the blender to break it up, and that would probably just be a very fast process. Then for the storage part, which has become my favorite step because I get to use my mason jar vacuum sealer. Now, this is not a necessary step at You can keep it in a cabinet easily at this point, and it should be fine for weeks to months. The cap is the most important thing to keep humidity out, however. So make sure that your lid has a rubber gasket. If the humidity is able to get in, then your powder will clump much quicker. If you use a canning jar with a lid with the vacuum sealer, this keeps things stored in the freshest conditions until you're ready to use it. With all of my dehydrating, I don't plan to keep this unused for very long at all. Everything will be used within months. But this vacuum sealing process allows the powders and dehydrated food in general to be stored for years or even decades. On my last video, somebody asked about the length of time for storage, and I did mention that for optimal nutrition, I wouldn't store things for that long. Keeping it under a year will allow for maximum freshness and nutrient retention. To circle back to what I said at the beginning of the video, this powder can be used just like you can any greens powder. I even mix it right into the greens sometimes, and it works great. Greens have amazing nutritional benefits for us, and so does cabbage. Cabbage is in the brassica family along with broccoli and things like that, and it is an amazing source of fiber, vitamin K, along with so many others. Just a quick Google search, you can find out all the amazing benefits to cabbage, and it's not just with vitamins. It's also a great source of antioxidants like polyphenols and many more that you can easily find as long as you're dehydrating on a lower temperature, as we did in this video. More of that is retained than when cooking at higher temperatures, and that would include most general cooking that you would do on the stove or in the oven. So in my book, these are huge benefits to getting a good dose of cabbage on a regular basis. Do you think dehydrating cabbage is something you might try? You know, I was just thinking how amazing for when traveling to pack some of these dehydrated powders to incorporate into foods, even just as a topper. Sometimes when we travel, our healthy habits are harder to carry with us, but this would be a super easy one. All right, that's it for this video. More dehydrating and other kitchen projects coming. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you soon.